We are built to witness, experience, and interact with the beauty and chaos of life, without knowledge. With knowledge, the experience of awe around intelligent creation compounds and empowers the heart with a deeper understanding of our place within a self-similar universe. In order to differentiate and so understand the verbs, nouns, adjectives, and conjugations that existence speaks into form, we need categorical organization around nature's varied expressions. Conceptual frameworks of designations and systematic classifications grant us access to understanding the lexicon of form, the language of the universe. The entire lexicon, or alphabet of form, although fascinating in its categorical essence to some, becomes best integrated when paired with an aim, or formal subject, like seeing a hexagon in a stone, or a spiral in a sunflower. Categories, classifications, topologies often contain subcategories, classifications, and topologies, creating a large swath of information only relevant in bulk for data-driven minds. So, instead of going through these designations systematically, all in one section, it makes sense to learn terminologies relating to the subject at hand. Our first formal subject includes just that, the human-centric epitome of creation, the hand of the human being. Humans are fauna. But before we begin to understand what the human being shares with most other things on Earth, it's necessary for us to dive into two subjects that you may have heard about: the spiral and the sacred cut. Also referred to as the golden cut, golden ratio, section, number, proportion, divine proportion, or its Greek designation, phi. Essentially, all different names for the same thing. This sacred cut is a ratio or comparison between two parts. The sacred cut divides the two parts of the whole in such a way that it dictates that the longer part divided by the shorter part is equal to the whole length divided by the longer length. Okay, so what? We'll see shortly why this expression is ubiquitous within nature's fauna. One of my personal self-interpretive lenses regarding this phenomena is that all is one. The monad contains the relationship to the small, while the small also contains the relationship to the monad. Let's learn a little bit about this sacred cut. Numerically, it's actually an irrational number, in that we've assigned the term irrational to numbers that go on forever and without pattern, whereas rational numbers are whole numbers, or numbers with decimals that either have an end point or repeat in a pattern. The interesting part of this is that within the world of form, nature generally creates in whole numbers to create the world we know. She rounds up or down. In order to understand how this happens, we need to look at another number sequence that nature follows. This is the Fibonacci sequence. The sequence is arrived at by merely adding the two previous sums. To the left, we see the two numbers, and to the right, we have their ratio in relationship to one another. Notice, as the Fibonacci sequence progresses, it gets closer and closer and closer to the perfect, irrational golden cut, never quite reaching, but progressively aspiring to perfection. So, in fauna, where does the Fibonacci sequence show up? The answer? All over the place. It's said that we're made in God's image, and this is the primary mathematical and so formal reason why. As we'll see, the same ratios used to create life forms on Earth, systems of proliferation, and even phenomena in the cosmos are the very same ratios used to build the human system. Now that we're familiar with the golden ratio and the Fibonacci sequence, let's unpack the spiral. Looking at these two aspects of geometry will serve us greatly down the road. What is the spiral? On a symbolic level, geometrically, it is the intermediary designation that traverses between the circle, or monad, and the hull arm, all of which we covered in Chapter 1. Dimensionally, it extends from the center, or point, and expands outward through time. It's characterized by a continuously widening or narrowing curve that revolves around the still point of origination. It follows a path that moves away or towards the center while rotating around it. Often, the symbol of the spiral throughout human history has represented the classical element of water, as it's the chief geometry in fluid dynamics, which govern phenomena such as vortexes, river eddies, and hurricanes. The spiral's paramount symbology is that of the cyclical nature of life itself. Mathematically, there's a slew of categorical spirals that contain different properties. In fauna, several of these spirals frequently appear in biological growth patterns. Our fingerprints, the growth of our hair, our ear canals, intestines, our heart and blood vessels, our movement and musculature that often wraps around our bones and joints, and even our DNA and embryonic development. Spirals are not only a symbolic function of time and conceptual aspect of mathematical models, but are absolutely fundamental to the development, function, and anatomy of life itself. The human being is a prime example of how nature organizes, processes, and structures the human form through the geometrical language of the universe. Let's explore some of our body parts in relation to the golden cut, starting with the hand from earlier. Humans, of course, come in all shapes and sizes. However, the golden ratio reliably rests upon the average bone structure of the human body, as anatomical proportions remain generally consistent within small variances. Amazingly, proportions of Phi trend equally between both sexes, with the exception of a few aspects of the female skeleton, such as the pelvic girdle. The tip of any finger or first bone phalange segment is Phi to the second phalange. So is the second to the third, and the third to the fourth. The hand, in ratios of structure and motion, is the microcosm of the macrocosm that is the entire human body. The tip of the finger to the wrist compared to the wrist to the elbow. The shoulder to the elbow compared to the elbow to the fingertips. The upper arm to the lower arm. It doesn't stop there. The top of the head to the sacrum compared to the sacrum to the tip of the toe. Top of the head to the chin compared to the center of the shoulder joint to the chin. Top of the head to the center of the shoulder joint compared to the hip to the center of the shoulder joint. The chin is to the lip, as the lip is to the nose. The chin is to the nose, as the nose is to the brow. The chin is to the eye, as the eye is to the top of the head. Using the width of the torso, we can even construct vertical golden rectangles over the human body, following the very same golden skeletal points. Any digit's golden phalange points even approximate musical root harmonies amongst their highs, lows, and averages. This list of human Phi expressions in form and musical ratio equivalents is not exhaustive. We embody a literal harmonic wonder. It's not just us. Insects, crustaceans, mammals, amphibians, fish, birds. Let's view some examples. Instead of a linear central approach, we can apply a phi matrix of golden and other rectangular proportional relationships, starting with a couple of our hominid cousins, a macaque and chimpanzee. Keep in mind that these are just visual approximations using stock photo representations, not anatomical diagrams. Still, they're close, and phi relationships are phenomena based on charted averages. Even in humans, and using obvious facial markers, phi persists throughout age, sex, and ethnicity. However, just because the sacred cut is found widespread does not mean that it's dominant nor universal within forms. But it is incredibly common, especially so in the insect kingdom, which composes around 9/10 of multicellular life forms on Earth. How about felines? It's said that a cat is a cat, no matter the size, and it's clear that this holds true in more ways than temperament. Has this sacred cut underpinning all life always existed? It appears that way. Now that we've covered the golden ratio, golden rectangles, the Fibonacci sequence, and spirals, let's throw it all together. You don't need graph paper to construct one, but it makes it easier. We start with 0, or a point. Then we move to 1, so we create a square with sides equal to 1. Then another square of 1. Then a square of 2, of 3, of 5, of 8, of 13, of 21, and so on. Now, we have a Fibonacci spiral. Here's a shell that a Japanese chef gave me. We'll use a caliper to chart its progression. The first segment of this conch happens to be around 5, a Fibonacci number. Let's see how close it gets. Pretty close, if you ask me. Here's some other shells exhibiting Phi. How about the bird nation? The arrangement of feathers in the wings and tails of some bird species can follow the Fibonacci sequence. Also, the number of eggs laid by certain bird species usually equates Fibonacci numbers. It's not just in physical form that Phi shows up. It's also found in behavior patterns like mating, foraging, and acoustic phenomenon. Picking up a shell and listening to the sweet sound of the ocean reveals acoustics stemming from Phi. The schooling behavior of certain fish species can exhibit patterns that approximate the golden ratio, lending to predator avoidance and a movement efficiency within the group. These observations are based on certain species, like herring, exhibiting fractal patterns in their schooling behavior, which can include Phi and Fibonacci numbers. Humpback whale songs exhibit hierarchical structures that also resemble fractals. Further, bat echolocation calls often exhibit patterns resembling frequency-modulated sweeps that follow mathematical principles. These calls can include harmonics and frequency ratios that align with Fibonacci sequences in some cases. Female bees often lay eggs within cells in a sequence that corresponds to Fibonacci numbers. It's proposed that both bees and birds have been trained by flora around energy expenditure dynamics, i.e., finding food with minimal exertion. Flowers often efficiently exhibit the Fibonacci sequence in their plume and seed patterns. So, for the purpose of efficiency, birds, bees, and other pollinators can maximize their intake by focusing on patches of more densely packed flowers and seeds. It's also thought that the flight path of bees leaving and entering hives follow the golden ratio due to their complex flight paths using the sun as a compass, as well as polarized light as a part of their navigation system, which guides them over long distances. Bees have many compound eyes, composed of thousands of individual photoreceptors, increasing the prospect of this probability, lending to equipped efficiency. But this area of scientific research is incomplete. We've seen that the Fibonacci sequence shows up in fauna's bone structures, body segments, natural phenomenon, and behaviors. Let's learn a little more about our own bodies. Although the pelvic girdle in women strays from the golden proportion in order to accommodate new life coming through the portal of the Mandalora, her reproductive system does not. The length to width ratio of a woman's uterus at birth is about 2 to 1. In old age, it's about 1.46. And during a woman's most fertile stage of development, between the ages of 16 and 20, this ratio is 1.6, approximating Phi. The liver is organized in lobules, which are often composed of hexagonal or other polygonal prisms. Our lungs, from the trachea to the alveoli, exhibit 23 orders of branching, and just like a tree, morphologically speaking, has roots and branches that swap CO2 and oxygen. The cardiovascular system, nervous system, and the brain's neuron network all exhibit this very same branching of fractal-like geometry. Not only in our biology, but our very experience of life, through our senses, is also predicated on and functions through a geometrical basis. Our dominant sense of the world is through sight. Basic observation can discern generally fine details of geometry. Although passive in the human experience, we visualize through spatial awareness and mental imagery stemming from light amongst the visual world. This can include the creation of visual diagrams or mathematical reasoning, all stemming from our witness of physical forms and light. The eyes, or visual receptors, mirror the geometry of light and is our last sense to develop as human beings. Photons compose wavelengths of light, which exhibits wave-like and particle-like properties, which we call wave-particle duality. This same duality is found in the famous quantum physics double-slit experiment, where observation itself changes results. Because light dynamics get very complex very quickly and require significant narrative and some degree of complex mathematics, it'll be traversed at a later point. For now, a quote from the namesake of Planck's constant, which is a crucial mathematical aspect of determining the relationship between a light photon's energy and frequency within quantum mechanics. It should be stated that there are many contemporary perspectives which plug into wave and particle dynamics. Independently fringe theories, academically current, and academically forgotten or even covered up theories exist. Several of these theories use the tetrahedron as a base block in populating and presenting the very experience of reality itself. The geometry shows up in areas of particle physics, chemistry, and even models for the entire periodic table of elements. Not to mention, the tetrahedron is an extra-dimensional expression of the primordial triad itself. What is obvious is that light is responsible for the experience of optical perception, being the primary interaction shaping how we perceive and understand our surroundings. Our eye's optical construction in relation to light coming in one end, refracting and being focused into the retina, where photoreceptive cells transmit information to our brains, is an absolutely miraculous and beautiful expression of a primary geometric archetype, the torus. As a play on words, I love that we call more than one torus, tori, and also that the Phi symbol itself is clearly a torus. Some theories suggest that we may more efficiently process visual information when it exhibits the golden ratio. This isn't a far cry from how other creatures have evolved to most optimally interact with the world. Particular cells in the eyes form hexagonal and irregularly polygonal surfaces. Sight relies on our optic receptors detecting light wavelengths at approximately 400 to 700 nanometers. Our visual sense differs from our sense of touch because its vibration receptors in the skin respond to different frequencies of oscillation. The nerves of the retina just aren't tuned to the same range of frequencies as our sense of touch. Touch enables us to physically interact with geometric objects and feel their surface roughness, curves, edges, and shapes. As humans, touch is the most directly intimate of the senses and the very first sense to begin development, visibly active during gestation at about 8 weeks. Even a fetus can respond to touch. The surface of the skin, called epidermis, is composed of layered cellular sheets. These flattened cells form a particular perfect form called Kelvin's tetrachedecahedron, and a class of perfect forms called Archimedean solids. It looks like this. You're listening to me now. How about hearing? Hearing comes partially online even before birth and is the second to last sense to develop before sight. It's common knowledge that sound and music is geometry, and this is part of the basis of the quadrivium. That sound, geometry, cosmology, and numbers all intersect, everywhere, as different expressions of one existential language. The ear naturally differentiates the intervals and spacing between notes that are next to one another. Within the cochlea, different hair lengths of the organ operate through the geometry of a golden spiral, assessing the pressure waves of frequency coming into the ear, resulting in sifting signal from noise. Hearing also has a large role in equilibrium and balance, which are spatial motor functions of the body's navigation system. This function is carried out by 3 canals within the ear, each responsible for one axis of space within the 3D world of form. Taste and smell. Fetuses can respond to odors in the womb, and newborns show preferences for familiar scents, such as mother's milk. Smell plays a crucial role in bonding and early recognition of caregivers, while taste begins development after birth. What most people don't know is that when we smell a rose, we are not responding to the chemical substances of its perfume, but instead to the geometry of their molecular construction. When chemical manufacturing companies formulate synthetic smells from crude oil, the goal is typically to approximate both the atomic arrangement of the molecules along with their effect on olfactory receptors. Said simply, we smell shape to a degree, and this is part of the reason why a cocktail of manufactured cheeseburger chemicals can fool our noses into proximal identifications with an actual organic cheeseburger. Let's take a quick look at the platonic solids, the most basic of 3D equilateral shapes. The reason these matter is because nature loves to use them for efficiency and symmetry. She also loves non-equilateral forms for variety and specialized functions where asymmetry provides advantages, but most often she utilizes symmetry for reliable consistency of light. On a molecular level, we see this consistency of form that builds our very structure and is the software for our functions. And as we can see, nature utilizes these perfect forms for molecular bonds. So, our very experience is informed by geometries. But what informs form itself? DNA. DNA, or deoxyribonucleic acid, are the instructions of life. DNA is a molecule that carries the genetic instructions used in growth, development, functioning, and reproduction of all known life, as well as many viruses. It's also responsible for passing instructions forward through generations. There's 3 primary types of DNA. many types of uncommon or less studied DNA. There's more types than I'll list. Humans and most other organisms on Earth primarily have bDNA, which twists clockwise when viewed from the top and which also tends to be the most stable within physiology. To a significantly less degree, we also carry separate types of DNA, from viruses, mitochondria, cells, as well as DNA from outside our chromosomes. The nature of these is to adapt to different functions and environments within the human body. Our bDNA is on average about 35 angstroms long in one complete helical turn and 20 angstroms wide. This length to width ratio is 1.75, which approximates 5. It is the only DNA type that does this, prospectively accounting for bDNA being the most stable DNA form in physiology. Each of our bDNA strands is composed of a double helix. The rungs that meet between the double helix are molecular builds called base pairs, which connect the strands together. A cross-section of our DNA reveals two stacked and rotating pentagonal geometries, creating a decagonal formation of nucleotides, which are the basic building blocks that compose DNA, storing and transferring genetic information. When viewing a dodecahedron from above, this is the geometry we find. As these decagonal information structures rotate up the double helix, we find the very same geometrical archetype created from a turning physical dodecahedron model. The dodecahedron is one of 5 platonic solids, assigned the classical element of spirit by its namesake. In this way, we find not a physical dodecahedron within our DNA, but pentagonal rung formations of biological data that echo the pathways of stacked dodecahedra. Considering that a dodecahedron is a 5 form containing golden rectangles, and that DNA's geometry has been measured to approximate 5, all of these elements appear to illustrate DNA operating under an animated dodecahedral geometry and forming the spatial arrangement and movement for the recipes of organic life. With natural forms in nature, we find the very same shape in forming the spatial arrangement of how pomegranates grow, how bubbles cluster, and prospectively even how the entire universe forms itself. If Plato could see all this today, I imagine he'd nod his head in awe and say something like, "Yes, spirit informs matter." With 10 rungs in a DNA strand's helical rotation, this number echoes the numerical seed patterns from the ancient Tetractys. about 20,000 times smaller than a strand of hair. If the DNA from a single cell in your body was taken out, unwrapped, and stuck vertically to a wall, it would reach taller than a man. And if the amount of active and dormant instructions that lie in your body could be laid out in their totality, it would circle the Earth thousands of times. Of these trillions of strands, 3 million base pairs, or 0.1% of DNA, are specific to the unique personal genome that you are.